So I'm arguing the case that if the sun and the wind belongs to everyone, then why can't everybody and most of us produce more energy, which is renewable in nature? Why are we giving energy security to only large private corporations and then making us, all of us as human society, again dependent on energy security held by a few rich people? So that's very basic. I'm trying to simplify as much as possible. And that's my paper was all about. It is completely driven by primary research in India and in a state which holds 16% of the total renewable energy potential of the country. India being the third largest polluter of carbon emissions, state of Rajasthan is very important for India's response towards climate change and energy transitions. So my research was driven by the Gandhian thought. It's too much of India heavy today. There was Nehru in the beginning of the session. So I argue that mass production shall be done by the masses. And as the wind and sun as energy source and a supply side, you could say in economics, is available to everybody, and the technology is also being, reduced. The cost of technology in solar and wind is going down, and last decade it has reduced by 60%. And most of the semi-skilled jobs can be used to deploy such systems. Then why are we just giving the entire control to large corporations? So that's the premise of which in which I argue my business case. So yeah, there are many important events as I talked about why this debate is so important right now. Why? Because if you see global international politics is driven by climate politics nowadays. Copenhagen Accord started it with countries agreeing, yes, the developed countries are the major polluters, but developing countries also have to come together. We all have to come together as a world to protect the world from global warming. Paris Agreement was signed. Donald Trump decided to back out of that agreement. Big furrow in the world, but then India was quite heavy on that. That they committed voluntary about energy transition, recognizing their role is very important in the world, being the third largest emitter of carbon radiations. So the Glasgow Climate Pact, which happened in the UK in 2021, was another called a New Green Deal, where again the world came together for stock taking of the Paris Agreement, and then basically new promises were made, new commitments were made on the flow of money towards from the developing countries to the developed countries to the developing countries based on the Paris Accord, which were not honored for a long time. So I have reduced my research scope to the impact on human health, because carbon emission it's an ocean that what all climate change can lead to. So my paper is focusing on majorly on how a human health impact and a socio-economic impact because of the impact on human health affects, and why financing distributed energy grids is important. So I'm based on the researches which reflect that renewable energy is making economic sense, it is healthier, and it creates more jobs as well. So it's not like it's a fancy thing that you have to drive a Tesla. You can still, you can still drive an EV car as well, or if you can still use renewable sources of energy in your life and still can reduce carbon emissions. So not everybody has to own a Tesla for going green. And India, as I talked about, so I'm going to skip, as I said, that it's the third largest emitter of carbon radiations. Its climate politics was revolved around, responsibility, but also, it said that in terms of per capita emissions, India is 145th, despite being the third largest emitter. So it says that it's not only my responsibility to, address the climate change to the world and all, but then slowly, with the international political consensus coming and India's conditionality of finances coming, it was agreed that okay, India will commit itself a net zero target of 2070, and then it will commit almost 500 gigawatt by 2030 from the source of renewables. And India requested that climate finance flows as a conditionality to such commitments. the finance flows have flown more into the transportation sector, which is more sustainable for business because a metro network will generate more revenues, and that's why the foreign investors are more easy and to invest such projects. But in energy, it's only still lingering around 11%, which means foreign investment flows are not as compatible to the ambitious plans of India and the 2030 commitments and also the net zero plan. So whatever capacity India has built till now, it's been very impressive. And they started with a wind kind of a trajectory, but they've gone more towards solar recently because solar prices crashed and solar is much easier to implement. The grids are easier to handle with solar power. Wind power, there's a technological limitation in handling grid power. So India, but of course, it has mostly been China heavy, like import from China, install it, and produce energy. And although in the last 3-4 years, India has adopted a self-reliance model after the border skirmishes with China and the global governance changes and all that, they are trying to build their own native solar power industry where and they've introduced protection measures in the industrial economic policy as well to promote domestic sourcing. Although I am a big critic of it till now because India it does not manufacture high-end photovoltaic instruments like wafers and cells. This protection is only going to reduce the use of renewable technologies because it will become expensive and the grid parity which has been achieved may be lost or it may not benefit the user so much. So I built a theoretical framework on my own, like how does climate change affects the environment and the health outcomes, which are direct and indirect. And then what is the mitigation plans according to me? Investing in carbon intensive, reducing the carbon emissions, and almost 50% of India's carbon emissions comes from energy production through the fossil based sources. So that's one of the major thing to decarbonize the energy mix of India, and that's why once you build a renewable energy infrastructure, you're able to finance resources, which leads to a new job creation, as well as, and if you invest in distributed grids, basically you are investing in small microgrids, which reduces the cost of large grid development as well, because the production is at source. It impacts energy availability during the day. So the farmers and who are getting load supply at night are suffering from lifestyle health diseases, also like snake bites and all, which leads to a lot of mortality in rural India. And once the energy availability is during the day, so basically an economic impact and a social impact both are clubbed together because you're able to develop medical facilities in the region. You don't have to migrate. There's no forced labor migration. There is availability of education and healthcare infrastructure, which also leads to more better per capita income in the area. So yeah, it's 3 minutes. Yeah. So I chose the state of Rajasthan because, as you see, the Rajasthan state has the pink reflects the energy sources which are based concentrated heavily in the western part of India, which is Rajasthan. So if I see the trajectory, solar has been a major contributor, and since the signing of the Paris Accord in 2015, there has been quite an exponential rise in Rajasthan's adding up of capacity, which means finance has been flowing. But the problem has been one of the schemes which was introduced to support the farmers with energy security, which is PM Kusum, which was aimed to have distributed energy grids because solar power, sun is everywhere. So the idea was to create these microgrids where farmers can produce their own electricity, use it as much and put it back to the grid and make business out of it as well. This policy on paper is very important, very impactful, not just for India, but for the developing world in Nigeria and other places as well, because they are all going to go through the same kind of transitions in next decade. So, however, what has happened is the policy has failed completely in India. The policy has failed because of something like what you studied, the financing gap in the SME. So this is, we can call it an SMEs as well, the distributed landholders. The finance availability requires no collateral, like you talked about non-collateralization, it requires collateral. So it's like 100% collateral. How can a farmer give a $500,000 of collateral on solar farms where the energy being produced? It's a business case of investment. The resources are there, and there is no banks are ready to come up and cooperate in terms of funding these small distributed grids Of course, there are market forces which then it will take away the vested interest of the large corporations and large solar park owners. Where I saw that in the same state where there is a 2 gigawatt plant, there is a 1,000 gigawatt plant as well. The world largest solar park is there in Rajasthan. So my argument was all about it was driven by primary research, interviews, understanding policy frameworks, and talking to the banks, the financial institutions, and I realized that there is a big gap in in providing finances to such equitable, socially equitable energy security instruments, and which has not just a social economic impact, but it's also an economic impact. I'm not arguing that it is philanthropy or we must do some bit of philanthropy. I'm saying that it makes a lot of economic sense to fund these projects for the government to save money on developing large grids, as well as for the people to improve their economic status and improve their social status, and for country to bring more stakeholders in an energy transition journey, which can speed up the energy transition. So based on these assumptions, my research found out that these financing gaps are quite big. India is definitely piling up a lot of renewable energy, but still the 2030 goal is very ambitious. It needs to add almost 75 gigawatt a year from now on, which is very, very difficult unless India decides to have more masses producing this as well, apart from just one segment, which is some private organizations, and certainly one which is very close to the current government. I think with that, I conclude that there is a policy recommendation which is required, and it's not just a policy which is going to just be India-centric. Policy recommendation for financing the distributed energy grids all over the developing countries who are going to be the part of the developing journey, like Nigeria, in sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya, or Vietnam, or Indonesia. All the countries will have to commit to their net zero goals which they've committed. And for that, they have to embark on this journey, and they are already embarking on. So if this policy succeeds in countries like India, it will have a large impact on the developing world, and then more kind of such initiatives can lead to development which is more inclusive and which has a concept of social equity. So that with the shortage of time, I think I conclude my research on that.
Thank you very much.